guys, Sarah here from Highland Haven Australian Shepherds and Highland Haven Dog Training, and welcome to episode 9 of Dog for Thought. Joining me is my co-host, daughter, and dog trainer extraordinaire, Sophie.
Hi, everyone.
So, Sophie, give us an update in Dogland. What's been going on?
Well, Twiggy's in heat, so we just bred her. We bred her twice. We bred her on Saturday, and we bred her on Monday.
Well, we bred her in quotes because she's an absolutely horrific breeder. She absolutely hates every bit of it.
Yep.
So she was totally uncooperative.
On Saturday. She did good yesterday, though.
He's such a nice boy. He was being so polite, and she was just being horrible to him. Mm-hmm. So we gave up and decided to use artificial insemination again. So you took her on Monday.
Yep, took her on Monday. She did very good because he didn't touch her at all. So she was chill.
What a pain in the ass she is.
Yep.
So I don't know. I have very, very low expectations. I don't think she's going to get pregnant.
I don't think so either. But my reasoning is because after that first breeding, she had that, you can kind of tell, the blood was a little darker, and it's not, usually they stop bleeding after breeding. So it makes me a little nervous. But honestly, she needs to be done breeding because it's just miserable. She doesn't enjoy it. So let's get some more females like Tula and Journey and Evie who enjoy breeding and enjoy having puppies and all that stuff.
Yeah. So we're not getting them. We have them.
Yeah.
We're going to add females.
My point is, I guess with Tula and Evie is they're not ready for breeding yet. So,
right. And they're coming up. We got 3. Well, we have an active breeding female in Journey, so she'll be bred next spring. Mm-hmm. And Evie will be ready this winter sometime. And then, I don't know, I guess in about a year, Tula will be ready. So we got girls coming up. So there's no reason to prolong the situation with Twiggy. She makes beautiful puppies.
Yeah.
But, it gets to the point ethically, if they really hate it, why are we putting them through this?
Yep.
So, we'll see. She gets pregnant, great. If not, I think we got enough on our plates coming up.
Yeah.
So we are going to be hopefully closing on our house. She's around the middle of September.
Okay.
And then we're going to be moving households. It's only a town over, but it's about 15, 20 minutes away. And then we have to sell. This house is in contract, the house we're living in. So we'll sell that a couple weeks later. And so we had a lot coming up.
Yeah.
So it's possible that this will be the season finale without the finale part. We'll see how we feel next week. I wanted to do 11 episodes. This is episode 9. But I don't know. It's Jacob's
so much
starting up
on.
at school again and with the move. And it's just been a very, very stressful summer.
Yeah.
So we didn't get some of the guests we wanted to this season. But we're going to start up again over the winter if all goes well. And I think people will be less busy in the winter and easier to schedule. Mm-hmm. So all those guests that we had spoken to that we weren't able to schedule, maybe we can get to them this winter.
Yeah, that would be great because we have a couple of really, really good ones that I've been wanting to talk
really
to.
Fun ones, for sure.
So
why don't we get started today?
Mm-hmm.
So today I thought we would talk about hot button issues. We don't have to spend a long time on each of these issues, but talk about things that sort of pop up and that we have strong opinions about. And I know other people do too, which is why we call them hot button issues. So what one do you want to start with?
Well, I feel like we could talk about raw meat.
Raw food?
Raw food diet, yeah.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know, there is a subset of people who like to feed their dogs raw food. There are raw food companies that provide this prepackaged meat for the dogs, and sometimes it's in the form of a patty. Sometimes it's in the form of like a big fat sausage, which you slice pieces off. So those are really the two types, right?
Yeah, and then I feel like they have don't they have meat cuts too? Or we've never had a dog with a meat cut, but I've seen online specific meat cuts for the dogs. But for the most part, it's ground beef, and some of them have bones in it, some of them don't, but it's usually grounded up. But sometimes you see a full, a steak that people give their dogs too.
Yeah, so some people really feel strongly, well, the people who feed raw food to their dogs feel very strongly about it because you would not do it if you didn't feel strongly because it's nasty.
Yeah, it's really unpleasant to make. But, I also understand where they're coming from to a degree of like you love your dog and you want them to have the best diet humanly possible. So I do understand where that comes from. I just personally would never do it.
And why is that?
Well, first off, through a sanitary point, I love getting kisses from my dogs. So like the fact that they're eating raw meat and then all that bacteria in their mouth and then they're going around the house licking people or children or objects or whatever, I don't really like the idea of them having raw meat in their mouth.
Yeah, so raw meat can carry things like E. coli, which can make people really sick.
Yeah.
Particularly young children and older people, elderly people, or anybody with an immune compromised system. So, dogs' mouths are dirty anyway, as are ours. But when you're adding the raw meat into that,
it's like another layer that it's like, I don't need to worry about this on top of everything else.
I agree.
And then I think number 2 would be, where are you getting it from? Are they how are they being packaged? In the end, they're animals. So if it's a big company, they're not going to really care what they put in the meat. So I hope for anyone who is feeding their dog raw food that they do a lot of research on the company to make sure that, they're getting good, they're not getting the scraps. They're getting like actual good meat for their dog to eat. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, you can say that about any kind of packaged food.
Well, I feel the same way about kibble too. So
you want to make sure you're using a reputable company that has oversight.
Yep.
Right, the government oversight, so that they're not giving you stuff that's going to poison your dog.
Yeah. Of
course, people in the audience are going, well, I fed my dog kibble 15 years ago, whenever it was, and when the Chinese decided to send us poisoned rice in the food, right? They were processing food in China with substandard ingredients and killed dogs and made dogs very sick. So there's always a risk for people as well.
Yep.
So yes, you want to make sure that the company is reputable that's putting this meat together, right? I think for me, the number one thing I don't really believe in a fully raw diet is that dogs are not carnivores.
Yeah.
And I think that people don't realize that. A lot of times people who feed raw, and not all, but there is a subset of people who feed raw who believe that they're doing it what's best because it's the most natural because they're carnivores. And dogs, domestic dogs are not carnivores. They're omnivores. They've been developed alongside of us for thousands of years. Started out eating our scraps, right, in our dumps, essentially, whether this was thousands of years ago or farming in a third world country today, right? Yeah. Dogs eat people's scraps. And this is how they believe that wolves slowly developed into the domestic dog, right? They were eating scraps that were thrown away by people. And that also included some sort of, vegetation, whether it's, whatever we're eating, leaves, corn, grasses, whatever we were eating thousands of years ago. So they're not omnivores. They're not carnivores. They're omnivores. So when you feed raw, you have to also then supplement that raw meat. They can't just live on raw meat. So I feel like if you are feeding something that you then have to supplement, to me it doesn't compute. Then it's not a complete diet. Whereas if you can get a prepackaged, well-heeled kibble, right, from a good, reputable company, that is prepackaged, scientifically based, full nutrition for your dog. Right? And raw is not that. It's kind of like being a vegan. You have to be very creative in how you eat in order to get the proper amount of protein, minerals, and nutrients because you're cutting out this huge part of the human diet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So I feel the same way about raw. We don't like raw just because it's more work when the dogs come here. It takes up so much space in our freezer.
Yeah, it takes up a lot of space. But when we move, we're going to have like 2 freezers.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited
Mainly
about that.
because of freaking raw.
Because we have a lot of clients who feed their dogs raw.
Probably 25% of our clients that come here. And it sort of makes sense. The people who come to us are very dog focused because they pay a lot of money to come have their dogs trained with us. So it makes sense that they would, sort of be very focused on all aspects of the dog. For me, sometimes we've seen over the years that people who over focus on one thing, and this is not all people who feed raw, but we have seen sometimes people that bring dogs to us or people that we know that over focus on something like feeding a raw diet. And you're looking at the dog and you're like, but he's overweight, or she can't walk on a leash because has no manners, or, fill in the blank.
Or has runny diarrhea all the time because she can't process the meat properly. And then you substitute it with pumpkin and rice so she doesn't have diarrhea, and it just makes it worse.
Right. Again, which goes back to if they're not able to metabolize the raw diet in a way that makes them healthy, right? They're having runny diarrhea or stomach upset or whatever. Again, your original goal was to give them the most optimal, in your mind, the most optimal diet. And you're like turning a blind eye to the fact that it's actually, in this particular case, does not seem to be the most optimal diet.
And I think it's funny because I think people don't always correlate what you're feeding them with what the waste that they're creating when it's like all one. And I think you get so wrapped into like, I want them to eat this supernatural food, and then you forget that like they're eating this natural food, but it's making them sick. So like it's a one, like the digestion, it's one unit. It's not 2 separate parts of like, oh, well, they're not having full, I don't know. I feel like people forget that it's like one cohesive
so that's what I mean, like,
thing.
Over focus on one thing, like feeding raw, and, unconsciously, I guess, I would assume, not look at the other pieces to this puzzle that might not be fitting because of that raw food.
And I would say the same thing is if your dog was eating kibble and they were having diarrhea eating the kibble. That would be my first thing, would be like, you should change to a different type of kibble, if that's changing from chicken to lamb but staying with the same brand, or changing brands completely, and seeing if that fixes the diarrhea, because that's usually what we've seen that makes a big difference in their diet.
Yeah, for sure. What they're consuming.
I'm not just talking about raw meat here.
Right. Yeah. What they're consuming. And because these are dogs that are coming to us and we're caring for them, we're very involved in what their poop looks like. Well, because we're scooping all the time or picking up with, a poop bag or whatever. And that's part of how we gauge whether they're happy and healthy when they're with us, because if they're stressed, likely it's going to be some stress colitis. If they're not feeling well, you're going to see that in the end product. So I just think that for something like raw, it has to be sort of a holistic approach. And I would say the same thing about somebody who cooks for their dog. There's lots of people who just cook different, a whole
ground beef and stuff like that. Yeah.
You're not a scientist generally. I suppose there's some out there, but the quality kibble that's out there is scientifically produced to have the proper vitamins and minerals in it. So I think that sometimes people who go overboard and want to feed raw feel that somehow that's being lazy, giving them a quality kibble. I don't. I feel like it's a ready-made meal where I know they're getting the nutrition that they need. That being said, there has been some studies showing that fresh food is beneficial to dogs. What those studies show, however, is that it doesn't have to be a completely fresh diet to get the same benefits.
Well, it doesn't have to be raw.
True. Doesn't have to be raw, doesn't have to be fresh, all raw to get those same benefits. So when people ask me, and a lot of my puppy buyers will ask me about, what to feed them when they go home, I think this somewhere in the middle is the best, right? So feeding them a base of a quality kibble, so that they're getting the vitamins, minerals, and calories that they need. And then you can add either some portion of raw on top of that, mix it up, or some portion of fresh, mix it up a few nights a week, or even once a day for one of the 2 meals a day.
I mean, for us, we give our dogs our leftovers. So if we have leftover steak or leftover pork or leftover chicken that we're not going to eat the next day, you mix that in with a little yogurt, and it's like here or there. So if we have extra steak, they get a little extra steak. If we have a little extra yogurt, they get a little extra yogurt. They don't get it all the time. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But that it's just easier for us to work it in with having 9 dogs.
Right, and it's green because my family is terrible about eating leftovers. Absolutely terrible. So particularly pork and chicken, our family does not like pork and chicken leftovers. By and large. So, what's our option? Our option is to throw it out.
Yep.
So I cut it up, I portion it out, I bring it downstairs and put it in the dog food fridge. And then for evening meal, I'll mix a little bit of that in each bowl. I do try to give them plain yogurt every day, a scoop of plain yogurt every day, because I think that, the cultures in the yogurt are really, really good for them. So I'm not saying a huge portion. I'm talking about like a scoop. One spoonful in each bowl.
And you only do it at night.
And we only do it at night.
Yeah.
And so they get the benefit of fresh, food along with the base of the kibble. For us, that is sort of a happy medium. I think that works well for us. When we have leftover meat upstairs, I'll certainly bring that down and add that in as well. But pretty typically every day they get a scoop of yogurt, and they do well in that. A caveat here: we have Australian Shepherds, and they generally have pretty much iron stomachs.
Yep.
So there's a lot of breeds out there that would never tolerate that sort of. Sometimes I have a little extra chicken in my food. Sometimes I have some dairy, like a yogurt. Sometimes I have a little meat. Their systems would not tolerate that, and they would have runny poops or vomiting or whatever. Particularly diarrhea. So you got to know your breed.
Yeah.
There's whole breeds and whole groups that have sensitive stomachs. Poodles come to mind.
Yeah.
Poodles and doodles have very sensitive systems. And for those dogs, it's even more important to have a good quality kibble that they can eat every single day and have nothing else. Because I know plenty of poodles and poodle mixes that if they grab something that's fallen off the dinner table and eat it, they're now going to have diarrhea for 3 days.
Yep. I think, sorry, Nancy, but when we went to Lake George, she has a miniature poodle, and I happened to give him some scraps off the table because I'm used to my dogs, and that's what I do. And he was being good and sitting there, so I just gave him a little piece of, I don't know what it was. I think it was turkey bacon. I gave him a little piece of turkey bacon, and then Nancy was complaining the next day how he had diarrhea and all this stuff, and I was like, oh, that was me. I gave him the turkey bacon, but she doesn't know. So if she watches this, she'll know. But
yeah, so, none of this, it's a complete moot point if you have a dog with a sensitive stomach. And you already know whether you have that or not. So raw food can be a hot button topic for sure for people. I tend to take the middle road on most issues. I'm not generally a black and white person about stuff, particularly when you're talking about living creatures.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the middle is a good compromise. Okay, next hot button topic.
I think we should do Flexi leashes.
Flexi leashes. Okay, like raw food, I am not black and white.
No, I'm right in the middle with
leashes.
a Flexi leash. Yeah. I love a good Flexi leash, but also they can be the devil.
Yes, for sure. And it really depends on the dog and the situation, right? So for me, a Flexi leash is great when you have a dog that has some training under their belt, right? That does not pull on the leash, for instance. Part of that training is responsive and engaged when on leash. So if they're on the end of that Flexi and you're coming up to a crosswalk or another dog or a person, you can simply call their name and they come back to your side and you can click that Flexi lock and you essentially have a 3-foot leash in your hand. In those situations, particularly if you walk in areas like we walk in the suburbs where we're not coming across dogs every, 5 minutes, it's usually a few times on our walk, they can have, the end of that leash should we want them to. We don't do that with our training dogs, but I mean, if we wanted to do that with our own dogs, you get a dog then that has a 20-foot or 10-foot or 15-foot extra leash where they can sort of take a little longer to sniff as you walk by or go out in front or go behind you or whatever.
Well, and to be fair, you walked our dachshunds and our Cavalier on Flexi leashes for their entire life. And then in the beginning of Remy and Ruby's, when we
just had 2 of them.
Yeah, we just had 2 of them. You walked them on Flexi leashes too. And it was always you recall them, put them to your side, and that's that. And I think when they can be terrible is when your dog doesn't have any training underneath their belt. They're on a harness, so you really don't have control over them, and their instinct is to pull. And then you forget that it has a locking mechanism, and you just let them walk up to random dogs on a skinny trail, and you're like, okay, like they're not even, like, I don't want to meet your dog. Like, I appreciate that, like, your dog's friendly, but like, I don't feel comfortable meeting your dog. I don't know your dog. I don't know you. I don't know their past. I don't know anything about your dog. So can you pull them in? And their owner's like, I can't. And I'm like, it's 10 feet. Like, and it's a Flexi leash. You should be able to, like, there should be rules around the Flexi leash. It shouldn't just be, free for all. And I think that's what people tend to be like, oh, well, I want my dog to have the ultimate amount of freedom, but they don't listen to me. So therefore, this is my alternative, instead of everything needs to have rules, no matter what it is.
For sure. I think the places where dog professionals really hate Flexi leashes are at the vet. I would guess that Jacob is nodding his head, and the groomer, right? So, and even like the pet store, when you're bringing a dog into an environment where they really need to have that locked, on lock, and on the shortest length. If you have to be in a place that has that, just a 4-foot leash, proper leash, is really, you should be on that. So if you're taking your dog to the vet does not, first of all, people need coordination.
Yeah, we were talking, it's a lot of coordination to use a Flexi leash.
And not everybody is coordinated, right? Not everybody walks their dog every day and practices with their Flexi leash. Sometimes they never walk their dog, or, they walk their dog once a month.
Or down the street and back, and it's not like in a public place with other dogs.
And they're walking into the vet and they're forgetting to lock, use the locking mechanism. Or they lock it too soon and there's too much slack in there. And with those darn Flexis, they've got that cord.
Yeah.
So you can't grab the cord because you'll burn your hands, right?
If it gets wrapped around somebody's leg, it burns your leg.
For sure. So it does take a bit of coordination. So places like the vet and the groomer, or anywhere where your dog's going to be a little bit nervous or skittish, you should just be on a 4-foot regular leash. It's not a place for a Flexi. A Flexi, to me, is for a well-trained dog when they're out taking a walk or a poop walk, right? Poop and peeing walk. Not for places like groomers and vets. And then when you add the lack of coordination of the average person, it just makes a situation that can be quite dangerous. And like you say, once that thing is extended, if you have no control over your dog, there's no like rewind. No, there's no reeling it in. It's not a fishing pole. You can't reel them in.
And I think that's also something we should really touch upon, is I think that if you aren't going to train your dog and you're going to have them on a Flexi leash, I think they should be a small dog. I really have a hard time with huge breeds. I'm not talking about like medium-sized breeds, but like huge breeds on these giant, the thick Flexi leashes. And once they're out on the Flexi leash, there's no way you can reel them back in because they're so strong. And then on top of it, most of the time they have harnesses on. So it's like now your dog is blocking the entire path, which is plenty of room for me to walk by, but I can't because your dog's taking up the whole path and you can't wind them in. And so therefore now you're running after them and they're twisting around you and you're getting burnt. And meanwhile, you and me are just standing at the end of the trail waiting for them to wind their dog in or decide to turn around.
Smug.
Yeah, like, are you real for real? Can we? I don't know. It gets frustrating because it's such a amazing tool to have, and we use it all the time with water. Like when it's really hot, we'll bring the Flexi leashes so the dogs can go out and swim. Training dogs can go out and swim because we don't trust them off leash, and they get the feeling of being off leash and be able to swim and do all this stuff, but we don't have to worry about them swimming too far or running away when they get on land or not listening for whatever reason.
Sure. And there are other people's dogs, so we have extra protocols to make sure that they stay safe when they're with us. Yeah, so there's the coordination piece of it, and there's the common sense piece of it that seems to be overlooked a lot. Another part of that common sense piece is if you're coming up to a dog on a walking path, it drives me crazy that they wait until they're right up on us to try to reel that dog in. If you have your dog on a Flexi and you see a dog coming up, you need to be doing what you need to do to retract that Flexi and lock it way early.
Or asking, like shouting, is your dog friendly?
But this is the thing. If you're all retracted and locked,
at
any point you can unlock it if if that dog decides it's acceptable to meet the dog passing by. It's not like if you retract it, you lose your chance for dog socialization.
No, you're right.
Because you should be asking anyway.
Yeah. Always ask. I don't know why people don't ask. I feel like that's...
Well, they ask. They ask after their dog is in my dog's face, No,
and
then give me a hard time.
We had two people approach us in the last week. They didn't even ask. They just walked right up on us.
And then get mad when I literally just put my hand up and said, no.
No, thanks.
They got mad.
Yeah.
So, although the lady today was nice.
The lady was nice today, but
which is rare.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm mentioning it is because it's so unusual.
Yeah.
She had a big doodle. She was walking on the wrong side of the road, and
she had a Flexi leash.
No, I thought you said it was a...
Nope, it was a big doodle on a big Flexi leash with a harness.
Okay. And she started coming close to us, and I said, they're actually not friendly, which the dogs we walk are all friendly.
Yeah.
But we tell people that because we don't want them to meet for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
And she went, oh, okay, thanks for telling me. And she reeled her dog in and kept walking.
That was it.
Not hard, people, not hard to take a little pushback and not get all butthurt about it.
Yeah.
And start calling me the B word or whatever.
Yep.
Flexis.
Yeah. And here's another one. I ride my bike on the rail trail, and when I was first riding my bike on the
rail trail is, for those of you who don't live in this part of New York State, the rail trail is actually an old railroad track that has been repurposed into a walking and biking trail. So if you can imagine the width of it, it is about the width of one single railroad track.
Yeah.
So it's maybe 10 feet across.
Yeah.
So, and you can ride your bikes and walk on it, which is very difficult for people because not everybody has the same understanding of what the rules are. Like you walk on the right. So go ahead.
Yeah. Well, that kind of plays into it, but, so I was riding my bike, and I'm always super aware of dogs and people because we share the bike trail. I don't think it's for bikers or for people. I think it's for both of us. So we both need to be conscious of what we're doing. And so this was when I was like first riding my road bike, and once you get into a high gear, if you're a biker, it's hard for you to downshift. So it takes a while for you to downshift. And so I thought this dog was off leash on the right side, but it turns out he was on a Flexi leash, extended all the way out. I think it was like the longest Flexi leash
so
you
the
could
Flexi
possibly
was
have.
Across the trail?
Yeah, it wasn't even across the trail. It was like if she was walking on the right side, which was awesome, and then her dog was all the way out on the right side. So usually people who have their dogs off leash on the rail trail, their dog's perfect. They don't cut in front of bikers and stuff because bikers use that trail all the time. And I've seen plenty of dogs off leash that stay to the right on the grass. So that's what I thought it was. I thought it was a dog off leash on the rail trail, and she was well trained. But of course, that's not what happened. She had a 10-foot Flexi leash, if not longer than that. And her dog was not well trained at all. And so I came up behind her and I gave her, 5 feet before I said something or something like that, which was my bad. And then I slammed on the brakes because I realized the dog cut across and started running at me. And then I slammed on the brakes, and the lady got twisted up in the Flexi leash and got burnt and all this stuff. And
I love that for her.
Oh my God, it was a disaster. And I just stood there while she's like trying to reel her dog in, and her legs have like burns on them.
I love that for her. Sorry. It's just, you F around and find out, and that's exactly what she did.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have gotten caught in that Flexi leash and gone over your bike handles and gotten really seriously hurt.
Yeah. Luckily, I stopped before. And I also was when I had my clipless pedals, which is when you clip your feet into the pedals. And it was like my first time riding it. So it was a bunch of like red flags that just, it was a disaster. But luckily, I didn't fall off my bike. I was fine. But the lady got messed up. she fell on the ground. It was like a whole thing. And I couldn't help her because I was
listen,
hooked into my bike. So I was like,
Everyone's gonna
sorry.
be like, what do you mean you love that? I don't want to see people get hurt. I don't.
No,
but you know, if,
I don't think
if
she'll
it's
ever do that again.
If it's between me and you, and you're the one being irresponsible, I love for you to get hurt and me not. Like, that's on you, lady. I mean, it's just again, the lack of common sense when you use these tools is what I think drives everyone crazy. And then you get people and trainers and whatnot, dog professionals. Then they dig their heels and they say all Flexis are terrible. Let's get rid of all of them.
Yeah, and it's like,
and
what?
That's what we need to do is use these kinds of tools and raw food, and you can use common sense and all this stuff. Again, it's not a black and white issue. It's an issue that needs common sense applied to it.
I love a Flexi leash, so don't get me wrong. I love a Flexi leash. It's just you need to learn how to use them, which and
use them in the appropriate setting.
Yep.
Okay, another hot button topic. What else we got?
We could talk about e-collars.
Okay, e-collars. So e-collars, for those of you who don't know, stands for electronic collar, right? Traditionally, in the old days, we called them shock collars. Now they're called e-collars because it's actually not a shock. And you want to explain a little bit about what an e-collar is and what the stim feels like?
So there's a bunch of different settings. Mainly what I use for Twiggy is I use stim, which is kind of like if you were going to go to PT and they were going to put those electrodes on you to get your muscles moving in different directions and warmed up. That's what it feels like. It just feels like a muscle twitch, or like, I don't know if like your eye starts twitching and it's kind of like, you're just like, oh, what is that? It's just an uncomfortable feeling. That's like the best way I could describe it. So the goal of it is when your dog is running after a deer, and they're in that id mindset. Prey drive. It's kind of like a tap on the shoulder, and it kind of knocks them out of that behavior. So then
behavior interrupter. And
so then they're able to kind of look for the person to be like, oh, whoops, I'm chasing deer. I didn't realize my mom can't see me anymore. And then they're able to kind of like think about their actions and then come back.
Interrupt the behavior.
Yeah.
Right. So specifically, you're talking about using e-collars in one very particular situation.
Yeah.
And I think that this is where they have a terrible reputation, e-collars, because people have, again, used them without common sense or knowledge or understanding. In years past, they've been, and they still are used in abusive situations. You have to know yourself before you use an e-collar. In my opinion, you need to have a real understanding of dog behavior. Your dog has to already be trained. We never use e-collars in training.
No.
It is simply a belt and suspenders sort of situation where your dog is, we believe, we use them in an off-leash situation. If you're out in the woods and you have a deer that runs by, you want to make sure your dog doesn't disappear for 3 days or run out into the street after the deer, right? And even with a knee collar, that can still happen, right?
It's
so
not
you're always
foolproof.
taking risks when your dog is off leash. Honestly, you're taking risks when you leave your house. But with an e-collar, you can be off leash in a safer way, right? So you're reducing the chance of something like that happening down to really minimal. Not all dogs do well with e-collars. They're not hard to work with when you have a real understanding of dog behavior and dog training, punishment versus reward, things like that. They also come with a sound.
So I was going to say they come with mine at least comes with vibrate, which it sounds like, oh, vibrate would be like the number one thing. Why would you use stim? But actually vibrate distresses the dogs. I've used it before on vibrate and thinking that it would be easier. And it stresses them out because they don't know where it's coming from. So it freaks them out. Where like stim, it just feels like a natural muscle twitch, which could happen at any point to anybody, humans too. But the vibrate freaks them out. And then they have a sound, or it's like a tone. And so it, before they do a bad behavior, it will give a tone instead. So a lot of people will use the tone as like a warning, like don't run after that deer. And then, when they decide to run after the deer, then they will hit the stim. to interrupt the behavior. But it's kind of like a
to be fair, they're both behavior interrupters.
It's like
one is a lower level of a behavior interrupter, and one is a higher level. I think that if anybody is, interested in doing e-collar work, getting a really high quality e-collar, which will cost you $300-400.
Yeah, mine was like $200.
Yeah, because you want one that has many, many levels. You don't want to get an e-collar that has 3 stim levels.
Well, it's like, I think the basic one's like 7 levels.
Okay, so 7 levels. With each level that you're going up, that is a huge jump in intensity. So if you get one that has 60 levels, you can level up very, very slowly.
Mine has 100 levels. So just to give you kind of like a overview of like, I work Twiggy on a 20, which most dogs only need to be worked at a 5, but she gets in such a, for the most part, people only need it for a 5, but that's without using a verbal interrupter. I like to work with her by using only a verbal interrupter. So only 5% of the time. But 95% of the time, I just use my voice and she'll come back when I call her.
Which, remember, means that 95% of the time that she's out in the world, it's an inactive tool. It might as well
never use it.
Not be on her. It's inactive. So when I say that you really have to know yourself before you use an e-collar, trainers and people on the internet, nefarious types, can suggest e-collar work and all kinds of stuff. And the problem with an e-collar is when you're feeling frustrated and your dog is doing something that is really frustrating you, you are much more likely to be super harsh, right? And having a tool in your hand that you can crank up and really zap that dog, you really have to know who you are. It's a lot of power.
It is. And your dog, for the most part, the videos that I have seen, the dog has no idea why they're getting shocked. And they have no idea where it's coming from because you didn't teach them that this feeling means this. And I think that's where it comes into play of a handful of trainers that at least we've heard from, like, clients coming to us and be like, we went to a trainer and they told us to use an e-collar and blah, blah, blah. They use it on reactivity. And I would never use it e-collar on reactivity because it's adding fuel to the fire. Your dog's already at a 10, so we're going to punish them to an extreme degree when they're already scared about the situation, which is managing the behavior instead of being like, why are they nervous about the postman? Why are they nervous about, another dog? And getting to the root of the problem, it's kind of like a Band-Aid.
Right. And then the other very small percentage of that group are dogs who are being reactive because they're truly aggressive. So I guess you could make a case that you could use e-collar training in a dog who's truly aggressive and trying to really kill another dog when they're on leash. I would go back to last episode.
Yeah.
Why is that dog still around?
Yeah.
If a dog is truly aggressive and looking to kill other animals, other dogs, or injure people or children, that dog needs to be behaviorally euthanized.
Yeah.
It's a danger to society.
It's like a really big Band-Aid that you're putting on a super serious situation.
So the only way I would say it makes sense to use an e-collar in reactivity is if you have a super aggressive, truly aggressive dog who's not reacting out of fear, but reacting out of aggression. And in that case, I don't want you to have that dog at all, much less the e-collar. That shouldn't be happening because that dog's a danger to society. So e-collars, I don't use them. You use them much more than me because you use them regularly on Twiggy because you're always taking her in the woods and riding bikes and stuff with her.
Particularly biking because I don't have leash control. I'm on a bike, I'm on a vehicle, and if I see something super far ahead, I can stop my bike and reach her and be like, hey, come back, please, because there's another dog off leash or another biker, or she decides to run after a different group of bikers instead of with me, and then she gets lost in the woods. Right. So that's the only case I use it, and I use it 5%. I barely use it. I think I used it the other day because we ran into like this guy with his dogs off leash in the woods, and she just stood by me until they passed, and then we just kept going. And it was just because I didn't see him behind the tree and she was already ahead of me. So
you just tapped her on the shoulder with
it was
the
like,
stem.
hey, please come back. Emergency, please. It's like an emergency.
Rather than screaming, Twiggy, with your voice, you use the e-collar to tap like, no, come back right now. So again, it's a safety thing for her. I don't use e-collars because the stuff that I do with the dogs doesn't require it. It doesn't really make sense. I would never endorse an e-collar used in regular training. If you have a dog who's not listening to your voice and your training techniques, that dog isn't trained.
Yeah.
Or that dog is truly dangerous and aggressive and you shouldn't have it. So, people will talk to us about e-collar stuff when they talk about, when it's a prospective client for training. Yeah. And, that's one of their sort of red flag questions for me. And I actually don't say, we don't use e-collar. I don't say that. I say we actually do e-collar training, but that is a separate program for the completed dog. So we will do an e-collar program week, an extra week of just e-collar off-leash work with a dog who's already gone through 3 weeks of foundational understanding and training. And only when we feel that they're emotionally mature enough to handle off-leash work. So we wouldn't do e-collar stuff with a 6-month-old puppy.
Nope.
That's very distractible out in the world off-leash because they're not developmentally in the place to be doing that.
And we also evaluate the owner if the owner is able to handle using
coordination.
Yes,
right.
It's a lot of coordination. So we have one client that we've she had 2 dogs, and we taught them both how to, because they're both hound mixes.
4 dogs.
Well, she has 4 dogs, but we only taught 2 of them.
I think she has all 4 of them on e-collars.
Not on the one I use. We
only worked with Olive and Bowie.
Bowie, yeah.
But Vinny and Goose also are e-collar trained because she walks in the woods with all 4 of them, and there's all kinds of bears and stuff in the woods.
Oh, I guess she did say that,
yeah,
because
she has them all
she
on her.
only uses the tone for the boys, right? And then she uses the actual stem for the girls.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, so we taught both of them how to use e-collar, but we already, I guess this is what you're saying, is she already knew how to use the e-collar.
She had an understanding. She already had some coordination and understanding of how it works. And the girls had been already completed their training with us several months prior and came back just for e-collar work. And really for her, it was getting the adjustment right, the actual number on the remote that works for that dog. Of course, we start very low and we inch our way up slowly to get to that point. And also making sure the girls understood what the stim meant. So pairing that with the word no. Right. So they understand, that's when they want me to stop doing what I'm doing and look. And then you're rewarding. Again, once they get really good at e-collar training, you almost never use it. Again, it's an inactive tool that's sitting on their necks that you just use in an emergency. Yep. That's how we are comfortable with e-collar work.
Yep. And I think for the most part, the girls were listening with their names, and coming back. It was when they would catch a scent of like a bear, and I think that's when she called us because they went after a bear or something.
Yeah, and they disappeared, and that was, I don't know, there's like 150 acres up there.
Yeah,
or something.
it's a
crazy.
huge amount of wilderness up there.
Yeah.
And so that's when she was like, okay, I need to teach them how to. So they already had like an understanding of being recalled. It was just that in case of an emergency, and they're both hunting breeds, so they're bred to run and find game in the woods. So,
so bottom line is, I would not recommend e-collar training to the average person unless you are working with a trainer you really trust and you have really good foundational understanding with your fully mature dog.
Yep.
So hot button topic slammed.
Yeah, I love e-collars. They're great.
Okay, so another hot button topic. I see this on TikTok all the time. Trainers arguing back and forth about whether or not dogs belong in bed with you at night.
Yeah.
Or on the couch, as an extension to that. Again, you guessed it, I'm right in the middle. I think that's perfectly fine in most situations when you apply common sense and good foundational dog training and understanding. And of course, depending on the dog.
Yep.
So you want to give some situations where it's inappropriate to have a dog on the bed?
So if you ask them to get off and they refuse to get off, that's like red flag number 1. If you ask them to get off and they refuse to get off the bed, and then
or give you any kind of lip about
give
it.
any lip, start growling or anything, they're not allowed on the bed anymore.
Yep, that's it.
That's it. No more bed privileges for you. Right. So that's like, I think that's what, when people start getting wound up in it, they're like, well, he likes, it's only once in a while. And I was like, okay, then he gets rewarded for that, because every single time you tell him to get off the bed, he growls at you, and now it's escalating. And now he thinks that the bed is his, not yours.
Right. So that's a resource guarding thing, right? That's where it's coming from. And yes, my guess is that is where a lot of internet trainers, when they're have a very hard line about this, that's what they've experienced. They work with aggressive dogs, which we don't, or work with dogs that have become aggressive because, again, they've been reinforced for that behavior, right? So if it starts out with me just low growling, and that works initially, and then you start ignoring that, I'm going to then add a lip curl and show some teeth. And then eventually maybe you're ignoring that and still making me get off the bed. And I'm going to keep escalating till perhaps I put my teeth on you. And that's usually when they'll call trainers. So there are certainly trainers who, have sort of an expertise in certain types of dogs. We certainly specialize in herding dogs. There's lots of trainers out there that specialize in pitties and bully mixes and things like that. Those dogs are going to have more of a tendency to resource guard in a dangerous way. Well,
and that's what they're bred to do. They're bred to protect their territory. So when they get on the bed and they give you lip, it's, we can get upset, but we can't get mad at them because that's what they're supposed to do. So therefore we have to give them a different area that they can call theirs instead.
Right. So then we're going straight, if we're talking about that type of situation, we're going straight to management.
Yeah.
And management would be that dog doesn't come on the bed or the furniture.
Or the furniture at all. And he has his own crate and we don't bother him in the crate. And that's that.
Right. So, and that could literally be any breed or mixed breed. Doesn't have to just be bully mixes.
It's just more tendency to, because that's what they're bred to do.
You will see it much more commonly in an English Bulldog than you will in a Bichon.
Yeah.
It's just more natural behavior for a bully mix or a bully breed. So yeah, and again, adding common sense, sprinkle of common sense into these types of topics. If you have a dog that's displaying that kind of behavior, yes, we need to be really black and white with that dog. It's not allowed on the bed. Other dogs will push back, they sort of start to resource guard, whether you're talking about, a Jack Russell Terrier or something like that. And that's a less dangerous situation for you, and generally can be resolved with some good training. Most resource guarding of the bed comes from a lack of rules and understood rules and boundaries between you and your dog, a relationship between you and your dog where they understand what is theirs and what is yours, right? So again, we're going back to foundational, good dog training, foundational understanding and learning, and a relationship with your dog to sort of prevent that. And then if it happens, we got to go back to the drawing board and work on boundaries.
Yep. So a great example is, because Twiggy's in heat right now, she doesn't resource guard the bed from me, but she resource guards the bed from Ruby, which Ruby naturally doesn't go on the bed because she just can't jump on the bed anymore. But, she's just giving her the eye and being provocative. And if Ruby gets up in the way that she doesn't like it, then she approaches her and is just an asshole. She doesn't attack
because
her.
Ruby is 13 and a half now. So sometimes when she gets up, it's a little bit chaotic.
Yeah.
She's slipping and moving around in a way that aggravates Twiggy because Twiggy is so hormonal at the moment.
So this is not a normal behavior. This is because of the hormones, which is why having intact males, having intact females, they just are on edge a little bit more than a spayed or neutered dog. So I knew that consciously, and that was one of the foundations of things that was really important to me is if I tell her off the bed, she has to get off the bed. So even with her in that, resource guarding the bed from Ruby, I can tell her to get off the bed, and I know she'll get off the bed. So it's not a big deal. But to make Ruby comfortable in my room, now I've made a management routine where, they don't stay in the same room together because I don't know what goes on with them,
when they're unsupervised.
When they're not supervised. And at nighttime when I watch TV, Twiggy goes in the crate and Ruby has free roam of my room. And then when I go to sleep, and I turn all the lights off, Twiggy can come back on the bed and sleep with me at night.
Because Ruby doesn't go on the bed.
Yeah. So, but it's a management thing.
Right. So understanding specifics of Twiggy and what you needed to do to work around that, and the specifics of Ruby due to her age and her inability to defend herself.
Exactly.
At this point, and being a little unstable on her feet, so needing some extra care and protection from you, and not be bullied. Yeah. She doesn't need to be psychologically or physically bullied by ridiculous. Twiggy.
Yep, and Twiggy's such a
Twiggy.
Such a beta. She's such a beta. Like, she thinks she's an alpha, and I'm like, girl. Okay. But I also manage that behavior by putting rugs in there too, so it's easier for Ruby to get up. But of course, Ruby decides to lay directly on the hardwood floor, so it doesn't make that much of a difference.
A lot of slipping and sliding and staggering to get up.
Even when I like trim her feet super short and do all that stuff, it is what it is.
I was looking at her today when I just let her out a little while ago, and she's getting weaker and weaker in the back end.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and she's such a dope when she goes out the door. She's going to fall down those goddamn stairs.
I know.
Those stone stairs. She's gonna fall down them because she's a fucking dope when she goes out the door.
Every night I walk her down the stairs because she decides that she's gonna chase after the bunnies and she's gonna kill one, even though she's 13 years old. And I'm like, girl, there's no way you're gonna reach those bunnies ever. But she decides she's gonna jump from the top step all the way down, catch herself on the concrete or whatever, the stone, and run after these bunnies. So I literally take a handful of treats and I walk her down the stairs and throw treats in the grass and say, go pee. Because it's the only way I can get her to walk downstairs.
Yeah. So as the older we all get, the more high maintenance we become.
Oh my gosh.
We will be like that too when we're
No, and for the most part, she's low maintenance. It's just the barking and her thinking that she's athletic. Otherwise, you would never know she was 13.
Oh, well.
Lord.
All right. So we covered, I think, 4 topics. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we've got lots of other hot button topics to discuss, but maybe we'll save them for a future episode.
Yeah. So if you guys have any hot button topics that you want us to hear, leave it in the comments and we will talk about it.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. We definitely try to take a common sense approach to this stuff. That's part of what drives me the most crazy about the dog training world right now is trainers get very dogmatic. They get very, very entrenched in a really hard line position. And anyone who strays from that position in any way is the bad guy, is the other. And, particularly with living creatures, but really there's not a lot of things in this world that should be viewed as black and white. There just isn't. No. There's some very small situations where, certainly right and wrong is clear. But for dog training stuff, a lot of it is really nuanced and it's ever evolving. So I like to sort of play the middle of the road and be on the right side of history.
I like to be open-minded. I think if I'm like meeting a trainer or if I, run into someone who's like a trainer and we start having a conversation, I'm throwing a bunch of bait in there being like, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I don't give them any of my answers because I want to know what their opinion is. And if they have a very black and white opinion, I really have a hard time listening to their advice. But if they're open-minded and they have like kind of like a back and forth and certain things that they're black and white about and
can admit that there are extenuating circumstances that make this opinion different in that situation. Yeah, I think definitely being open-minded and ever learning and evolving is the key to working with all animals.
Yep.
Parenting too.
Yeah.
Right? Any kind of teaching, you have to be ready to move with the times.
Yep. You got to be flexible. I don't like that whole like my way or the highway kind of vibes. It's not really our thing.
No, definitely not.
No, because there have been a lot of things that like I've looked back on and been like, oh, I should have approached it this way. Like we talk about all the time how like if we could re-raise certain ones of our dogs, how we would do it differently. And I would raise Twiggy completely differently from,
that's only 3 years ago.
Yeah. So, and if you're not thinking that way, I just question,
Yeah, for sure. So we got a lot of other hot button issues we can talk about in a future episode. But before we part today, I do want to talk about my new favorite show.
Okay, go ahead. I actually really like it too.
Okay, so this is not a dog topic.
But no spoiling. You can't
No,
spoil
I'm not going to spoil anything. Okay. but I want everybody out there who has HBO Max, whatever they call it now.
Or Hulu Prime. It's on Hulu, but it's on like the Prime part of Hulu. Yeah.
Okay, if you have not checked out Chimp Crazy yet, oh my God. Mm-hmm. That show is batshit.
Yeah.
It's crazy. All right, so if you're a lover of the Tiger King.
Yeah.
So I never watched the video, the movie or whatever, the series of the Tiger King. I listened to the original podcast, which was extremely detailed. Way back in, I don't know, before the pandemic, something like that. And then they made a whole documentary film about it. I absolutely loved the podcast. So this is made by, I think, the same director, same producer,
guy,
or something like that. And I thought there's no way he's going to match the Tiger King. Oh my God. It is so good. Chimp Crazy. It is so good.
And on top of it, it's like it's more women than it is like the Tiger King. I felt like was very male dominant of the tigers. This is like very in-depth mothery women.
Okay. So I'll just give a little quick overview, summary of so you guys can check it out. We should do like a whole podcast just on this show. So there's been 2 episodes so far. You've watched the first one.
Yeah,
I watched the first, and the second one uploaded yesterday. I think it's Mondays that it uploads. So I watched the second episode yesterday, and I was blown away. So it's about this whole underworld of people who have exotic animals, particularly primates. And to even get more specific, the star of the show, the person that they're following, is into chimps, right? She's into all primates, but chimps are her thing. And so they sort of delve into the psychology behind having primates, and particularly chimps, as surrogate children, right? And how it always goes wrong. Always, 100% of the time goes wrong, because as soon as they go through sexual maturity, which is like 5 or 6, they're unhandleable, the males and the females, even if you neuter them, right? You have to put them in a steel cage, and you really can't handle them after that. And we all know that because we all know of Travis the chimp. Right?
Yeah.
Bad boy.
We say that all the time. That's like a family.
Travis was a bad boy.
Travis was the bad
If you don't know
boy.
Travis the chimp, just Google it. It is a nuts story.
Yep.
And it happened not that far from here.
And be careful looking up photos. So
Yes, don't look up the photos.
Yeah, just like read it.
But the show focuses on this one woman who is sort of tangentially connected to Travis the chimp through the same broker.
Bloodlines, right?
No, the same broker.
Oh, okay.
Who, and it's just crazy. That's all I'm going to tell you. It is the most yum gold piece of content I've seen in a long time.
Well, and it's like you think it's going to go one way, and then all of a sudden it's like plot twist, and you're like, what?
Right. So
Who
2
would do
episodes, right? 2 episodes so far. There was a plot twist at the end of episode 1.
Yep.
I was like, and I kept waiting for you to finish episode 1 so I could talk to you about the plot twist at the end. And then episode 2, huge plot twist at the end of episode 2, and you haven't watched it yet.
No.
And I want you to watch it so we could talk about the end of episode 2, which is nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to try to watch it today.
Anyway, it's super fun. We're all animal people that are listening to this podcast, so I highly recommend it. It's called Chimp Crazy on HBO. It also has a companion podcast, which I'm going to start listening to. I can't tell you how excited I am about this. All right, that's my plug. That's my plug for this episode. All right, we should probably wrap it up. You're good?
Yep, I'm good.
All right. So we might be back next week. We might be back in a few months. But for those of you who, follow us on social media, you'll have updates of when we're moving, where we're moving, once we're there. The new house is going to need a lot of work. So my little anxiety about putting videos of the new house on my social media is that people are going to look at the pictures and go, why the heck did they sell that beautiful house for that?
Yeah.
Because it needs work.
It needs a lot of work, but we're very good at fixing things.
Yeah. So, and it's a bigger house, which is important because it's a bigger space for the training dogs and a bigger space for our own dogs. It's more land. It's more private. which is why we're doing it. But
Yep.
the house the bones are good. It just needs
A little paint.
It needs some
couple screwdrivers.
Needs some paint. The kitchen needs to be redone. The flooring, the outside, the landscaping. It's a whole thing.
I know, but you're excited because this is like your thing. You love
Yes.
fixing things that are broken. So
I'm
that's why we
super
train
excited.
dogs.
Absolutely. The same thing. I love the learning process. So, you guys will be able to follow us on social media and see where we are. And then once we get settled in there, we're hoping this winter that we're going to have a dedicated podcast room upstairs.
Yep.
And we'll try to come up with season 3 of
Yep.
Dog for Thought. Mm-hmm. All right. Until then, guys, thanks for joining us. Remember, Chimp Crazy on HBO and HBO Max. All right, guys. We'll see ya. Bye. Dog for Thought is written and hosted by me, Sarah Brown, co-hosted by Sophie Brown, produced, edited, and original music by Jacob Brown. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye.